Hello and welcome to this course, Blender 4.2. As you can see from the splash screen there, the version 4.2.6 is an LTS version. That means that Blender is going to support this version for at least 2 or 3 years. That's why it's a good idea to install this one and not an earlier one. Since this is your first view of Blender, you will see that it looks daunting. There's lots of stuff everywhere, and you have no clue of what is what and how does it actually work. But that's fine because this course will go through all of these parts slowly and surely, and you will get an idea of everything you need to know so that you can use Blender to make nice, high quality 3D images. When you open Blender, you will see that there's a default cube here in the center. And you have the x-axis, which is the red one, and you have the y-axis, which is the green one. You also have a z-axis, but it is usually not drawn. You then have a lamp, and you have a camera, and that's all there is in the scene at the moment. So when you start working with Blender, depending on your current needs, you can either delete the cube and add another mesh like a monkey. It all depends on what you need to do. And you can rotate this workspace or scene any which way you like with your touchpad or with your mouse. And you can left click to select things. If I want to select the camera, I will left click and left click. And if you want to right click, you will see that there are a number of things that will appear, and they are related to things that you can do right now in this view. But let's go through the whole screen and I will explain the parts as we go. Here in the left top corner, you have your basic menus, File, Edit. These are pretty much as you would expect in any Windows or Mac program. And also Edit has things that are related to editing. The most important thing in the File menu is the Save, of course, Control S, and also Shift Control S, which enables you to create new versions of the file. You always want to create a first version, and then instead of saving that when you make something, when you make changes to it, you want to say save as, like so, and use this button here, the plus button, to give you versions. See, Untitled 5, Untitled 6, and 7. That way, you can always go back to the previous one and you don't have to start from scratch. In the Edit menu, you also have a most important thing called Preferences. And when you look at your preferences, you can see that there are many options here in the left-hand menu. For example, you don't have to worry about that or that too much, or even that. What you do want to worry about or actually figure out are your add-ons, because add-ons are very necessary. For example, my screencast keys, which I don't have at the moment, but I can enable in my preferences, is a very useful tool for getting my keys to show when I touch something here. I can make it yellow and I can make it slightly bigger, like so. And now it's enabled. And whenever I click on something, you can see here on the left down, left bottom corner what I'm doing. I'm clicking on the end and the M, and you can follow what I'm doing here in the corner. And when you go back to your preferences and you look at your input or your key map, this is actually something you must do. You have to select whether you want to select with the left mouse button or the right mouse button. But the most important thing is this, the spacebar action. Currently it's at play, and that means that if you hit the spacebar, it's going to start an animation, and there is no animation, so nothing will happen. But when you click on search and you then save your preferences are now saved, and you can close that now. And if you need to know something about this, how can I move this, for example, I can now press the space bar and say move, and it will turn on the key you want to, or the feature that you wanted to use, and pressing enter will then stop that from being operated. We will return to more of these preferences later, but the key map and spacebar action is something that you need to change right now. The render menu is for setting your rendering, or actually starting your rendering. The render settings are down here on the right hand side when you go to your camera, but you can start it from here in the menu. You can create a new window, or you can go for the next workspace, or you can take screenshots from the window menu, and then of course you have help as you would expect. The over here you have a secondary menu, and this one actually moves if you change you into your edit mode. You can see it's different, or if you go to your object mode, and it's different again. Edit mode means that you can pick any part of your mesh, like you can pick a single vertex and you can move it like so. But when you go into object mode, any moves will apply to the entire mesh. So edit mode and object mode are very important. The others, well, yes, they are important, but not that much. Texture paint means that you can start painting on your object using paint tools. That's not used that much, but object mode and edit mode, these are the two main ones. And there's a quick key for going into edit mode and going into object mode, and that is using the tab key. This is something you will find yourself doing very much and very often. In object mode, you have different settings in here. You can add objects. And the most important thing in the object mode is the set origin. Now, all of the objects, as you can see, all objects have a tiny orange dot. And this is the origin of that object. And this is where Blender thinks the object is. Currently, it is in the center of the object. So you can see it, if I rotate it, it doesn't move. But I can set the origin wherever I like. I can set it to the 3D cursor, for example. Set origin to 3D cursor. And that didn't work. Let me try again. Origin geometry. Yep. And then object to 3D cursor. Now if I rotate this thing, it will rotate around the mouth area. So if I escape out of this and say object set origin to center of mass by surface, and now I rotate it, you can see that it's rotating around the eyes and not around the mouth. So setting the origin of the object is very important, especially in 3D printing, where you have to be able to set the origin to the lowest point of the object. You can see that there's a huge load of stuff in here, and at the moment you don't have to worry about any of these list items here. They are just ways of getting to do the same thing that you can do using the toolbar, which is here on the left hand side, and which we will go through in a different video. So just hanging there for a moment. Then over here we have tabs, and the tabs that we have are called workspaces. usually you are working in the layout workspace so that if you have a cube and you have a UV sphere and you set them there, you can see where they are in relation to each other. So the layout is usually used for aligning the objects in relation to each other when you are building a scene. For example, you might have a floor, you might have a window, and you could have walls, and you would just lay out your objects in that scene so that it will look like a room, like you saw in the first video where I made a quick room. The next tab is modeling, and while it looks almost the same, it is oriented more towards object modeling. And this is where you can select an object. You can actually select an object in the previous view as well and do most of the same stuff that you would expect to do in modeling. But this is meant for modeling more than the others. So if you want to do something with your mesh, for example, you wanted to take this one and you wanted to grab the others as well. And then you wanted to extrude. This is what you would do here in the modeling layout workspace. Sculpting is almost the same thing as modeling, but sculpting means that you are using the sculpting tools. I have to go to the modeling layout first and then pick this one. I don't know why my microphone hasn't been detected. It should be detected all right. So I go into object mode in the modeling window, select the ball, go into sculpting, and now I can use the sculpting tools to make the ball look different. There are a lot of different sculpting tools, and I haven't used these that much. That's something that hasn't been of so much interest to me. But some people say that sculpting is the most interesting part about Blender. You can sculpt things that would be very hard to make by modeling. Then we go back into object mode, and the next one is UV editing. And UV editing is where you have a mesh and you have the surface of the mesh um, laid out on a flat area. You can think of this like if you have a banana and you peel the banana, you still have the banana as a 3D object, but the peels can be splayed out on a table, flat on the table. And then you would think that that would be the UV map of the area. And if you are here and you want to select an area, you can see that those faces of the mesh are those faces here on the UV screen. And if I select everything, this is the whole area, whole surface area of the sphere. Again, not for you to wonder too much about right now, but UV editing is when you have to take 3D objects and make them into a 2D representation. Texture paint is where you can take your object and you can paint directly onto the texture, onto the UV map, and it will appear on top of the object itself. Um, shading, hold on for a sec, yeah. Shading is where you set up your lighting and you set up your world and you make a nice you make a nice representation of the objects in the real world. This is where you would go and add a material. I'm recording this on my laptop, and it's probably not one of the fastest on the market, and that's why it's taking so much time. But let me take a base color of a blue, and then I will make it metallic. And now if I go to my camera and I hit F12, this is going to take some time, but now you can see that my Suzanne has a metallic blue color. And this is the render result window. But I can go away from here. And as you can see, my world here is lighted by a real light source. This is known as HDR, high dynamic range lighting. In the back, there is a real picture of some place in the woods where you have light and you have colors, and all of that data is reflected on the mesh that we make here in the modeling or sculpting or layout. So shading is for doing lighting and doing shading on your objects. Animation, this merely means that if you click on an object and you hit the key I, and then you go to another frame, like frame number 60, and you move the object there, and you hit another I, you can see that your animation moves the object like so. So of course this is a most basic animation, but this is how it works. You place your object somewhere, you create a keyframe, then you move the object, and then you create another keyframe, and Blender will calculate how to move the object so that it actually plays out in the animation. The rendering workspace merely shows what has been rendered last. Compositing is a really complex thing, and it means the sum total of your meshes, the objects I mean, and your lighting and your shading and your background images and everything. This is rather complex, and I don't use it that much, but sometimes it's necessary to do that. So compositing is like one of the deep end things that you can do with Blender. Geometry nodes. This is an object. Suzanne is an object, and it has a group input, which is the geometry, all the parts that make up the Suzanne, and group output is the realization of the coordinates that you can see here on the left in Suzanne as they are reflected as an object. If I delete the group output, then I don't actually have any more Suzanne, but if I put out another group output node and I connect these two, I get my Suzanne back. There will be a whole total presentation on how to use geometry nodes, because this is probably, along with the material nodes, the node system in geometry is probably the most powerful thing you will ever see in Blender or in 3D. And scripting means that if you take a piece of code and you paste it here, this is Python. This is a Python console. If you have a piece of code that will create 100 random cubes and you paste it here and you run the code, you will see the result of your 100 random codes here in this window. We will try that later as well. So let me go back to the basic view. Over here, we have some settings that are related to snapping. Snapping means, objects being told to snap to each other, and this is how you set those up. Then you have a coordinate system set up, and in here you have your proportional settings for proportional editing. And over here we have viewport things that are related to viewports, and then we have viewport overlays, and then we have different views. This is the X-ray view. This is the regular view. This is the viewport shading, which turns, you can see that I have a blue Suzanne because it has a material and the others don't. And the last one is rendered, and this is either when you go and you render with cycles, you will see that it's actually rather slow to do the rendering because it's actually doing a lot of calculations even as we speak. It's trying to create a representation of Suzanne in real time, and that's why it looks like that. But usually you want to do with Eevee anyway because it's much, much faster. Over here we have the scene collection. You can have, this is the whole scene collection, but you can have collections, as many collections as you like. And if you create a new collection, this you can set that this object here would be part of the second collection. So you can apply things to collections, and whatever you do will affect all of those objects at one time. So this is where you will see a lot of stuff. If I create another cube with Shift A, cube, you can see that now we have a cube 001, and this is why you should always name your things second cube. Otherwise you will have cube 047, and that's impossible for you to figure out what it is. And down here we have the properties, and we are in the properties editor, and in here we have a lot of stuff like settings for the scene, what the render engine has to be, and the output when you do a render, it's going to be like a high definition picture here. And if you do an animation, you can set your animation to be whatever. There's quite a lot of stuff in here. If you want to make a movie, then you have to set this into FFmpeg video, and you can do color management, you can do encoding, you can do all the settings you have to do. This is for your view layer settings. This is your scene settings. This is like where we have units. Usually we use the metric system, and rotation in degrees. If you want to have it in radians, that's fine. Length, mass, kilograms, all of this is necessary because Blender does have a uh, physics system where you can actually set things that weigh more than other things. And that's why these settings are important. There is the collection settings, and then you have object properties. If I click on here, it changes into the sphere. Then you have a lot of modifiers. These modifiers are necessary for you to, like, how to create holes. Well, you deduct a cylinder from another object, and that gives you a cylindrical hole in the other one. Deformations, physics, all of this is here in modifiers. Then you have the lights, particle systems. If you wanted to create hair and make a nice looking rug on the floor, you could create the hair on the rug with the particle system. You have your physics tab. You have your constraints. If you want to constrain so that this moves along with that one, you could add a copy rotation with the target object, and it would be like sphere. So now when I rotate this object, you can see that the sand is copying the rotation of the ball, and this is sometimes very useful. These are vertex groups. These are again sometimes very useful when you have to take only a part of these vertices here, like so. Let's take the vertex. I can select those and I can create a vertex group out of this. Call it first group and save it, and then I can deselect it, or I can select. I can deselect them all, or I can select them merely by clicking here. So that's why vertex groups are pretty good. Materials are here. We saw that Suzanne has a material, a shader, a principled shader with the base color. We can change that to be like green, whatever. And if you want to add a texture to it, then you can create a new texture for it. Make it a checker, if I remembered where it was. I'll make it like noise. And then you can attach this type of material to your Suzanne. Down here you have your animation. This is not very useful, but it's there, so you can just like squash it down if you don't need it for anything. And over here we have our T toolbar, or tool shelf actually. When you hit T, it's going to go away and come back. And when you hit N, you get the N toolbar or tool shelf. And these are always related to whatever object you're working with and whether it is in edit mode or in object mode. And that's why we have these tabs in here. This basically concludes the first look at the Blender workspace and scene. And again, I want to emphasize that you don't have to understand that much of it now. All of this will be clear when you are done with the rest of the videos. But thanks for watching anyway.